Welcome to Homicide Life on the Set, a podcast about the Emmy Award-winning television show Homicide Life on the Street, with myself, Chris Carr, and Susan Ingram. On today's podcast, we're joined by the assistants, Stephanie Fontana, Chris Dingess, and Sunil Nayar. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest episode. So on today's episode, we're joined by three guests who are the assistants, and you'll find out in a minute why their title's the assistants. They're assistants in many different roles on the show, but we're joined by Stephanie Fontana, Chris Dingess, and Sunil Nayar. And before we dive into that interview, Susan, how are you?
Hey, hi, Chris. Great. Really looking forward to this episode for our listeners. I just think it's jam-packed. It's fun and informative, and it is a great look at many of the things that people don't know about film and television production.
Yeah.
And I said to Stephanie yesterday, how many things I'm learning on this podcast, having been, I'm on the set. I'm not anywhere else, basically. And how many things I'm learning about what people do and what their jobs are from this podcast, which has just really been fun. And this is just a really lively, really interesting discussion. So I think people will enjoy it.
Yeah. It's certainly, for me, when I was editing it, I was laughing a lot. I definitely found it one of our funnier episodes. Is it the funniest? I'm not sure. I'd have to really think about it, but it certainly made me laugh a lot. My wife was like, "What are you listening to?" I was like, "I'm editing at the moment." So, no, it was a really great chat, and you learn a lot of interesting things, not only how to deal with dodgy rodents, but you learn how to kind of help get a show going and get people to the right place. So,
dodgy rodents, I like that.
Yeah. and the technique to get rid of them. There's a particular technique that Chris shares with us later on.
We'll do a new cop show in Baltimore and call it Dodgy Rodents.
Oh man, that'd be a good idea.
Or maybe just follow a rat catcher around Baltimore. I shouldn't say that because every city has a rat problem.
Yes. Now I have a memory, and it could be a false memory, but when we were together in Baltimore, I feel like we saw a rat together, and you said that was good luck. Am I right in remembering that? I feel like it was near the car park.
And we did see. I want to say we saw some, not once. By the garbage cans. It was like, I think garbage day. There were garbage cans out in front of some of the homes on, was that Ann Street? I'm not sure. Yeah, down by the car park. And did I say that's good luck? Maybe I did.
Yeah, you did. Well, at least I think you did, because I had this memory. I'm like, was that a real thing, or am I just imagining it now? It's got to that point where certain memories, you're like, did I just make that up, or did I actually experience that?
Right. Maybe instead of good luck, I said, welcome to Baltimore.
Maybe.
You were lucky. The lucky shot to see one as soon as you stepped onto Thames Street, right?
Oh dear, they're quite they're well famous. No, yes, I hope to come back to as well at some point. So hopefully we can arrange that. So last year we set up a prize draw, and the cutoff, if I remember correctly, was 11:59 on New Year's Eve Baltimore time. And so today we're going to announce who the lucky winner is of a script. So Susan, which script was it again?
Yes, it was for All Through the House, which was the Christmas episode that year that Peter Medak directed, who we had a lovely conversation with recently on one of our recent podcasts. And this is from September 8th, 1994.
Wow.
Which was when the first draft went out, one of the early episodes. So I have, just so everyone knows, I have on a pair of elbow-length black beaded gloves, and I have put all the entries all printed out on the same size paper and folded exactly the same way into a collapsible silk top hat.
Yes, you bought this. So what's the film connection to the hat? What's the
film connection is I bought this collapsible silk top hat
Yep.
at a vintage clothing store in Ellicott City, which is near UMBC, when I was a film student.
Brilliant.
And it has it has a metal monogram in it. I think it's HLC. Who knows? Let me say where it was made. It is 95 Avenue des Champs-Élysées, Rue Janus 21, Lyon,
Yeah.
Paris. So that's where this
Oh, nice.
collapsible silk top hat came from. We're making the draw from, and I have mixed it up many times. And Chris, do you want to do a drum roll? Ready, reaching in, mixing, reaching in. Okay. Got one out. I'm opening it. So here's the winner. It's Chris from Woodinville, Washington.
Okay, congratulations, Chris. Another Chris. There's quite a few Chris's in this episode today.
Yeah, Chris everywhere. And Chris says in his email, "Thank you for this contest and thank you for your show. I found it just by doing a simple search for pods on Homicide as I started a rewatch. Though I now live outside Seattle, I'm a hometown kid. My folks grew up in Dundalk."
Oh, fantastic.
We say Dundalk,
Yeah.
Natch. And he grew up in Harford County. Thanks again for what you do. So, hey, Chris, hometown boy.
Yeah,
Awesome.
in Seattle. So he's done a reverse ballad because you remember Detective Ballard came from Seattle and ended up in Baltimore. So he's done a reverse ballad.
Right. That's great.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. And thanks for including your address. And I will get the script for All Through the House out to you, hopefully sometime this week.
Yeah. And we had some wonderful emails and, thank you to every one of you who did enter because every one of you said a lot of things that were very kind and you told us about how you sort of found the show. Thank you so much for all those lovely emails and for entering in.
Do you want me to read a couple more?
Yeah.
Okay, here's one from Clayton who just says, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. He didn't. Okay,
Yep.
so.
Belated Happy New Year and Merry Christmas to you.
And Brian from Kansas. Love the show. I watched Homicide in the 90s and kept the torch burning, hoping there could someday be a revival of some sort. Obviously, losing so many in the cast is impossible, but I always tell people this is an all-time favorite show. He found our pod around the time Homicide started streaming, looking for a watch-along podcast. So that's great. People out there that have just found us looking for one. And here's a nice one from Gabe. Gabe is fairly active on our Instagram, right, Chris?
He is, yes. Hello, Gabe. Thank you.
Hi,
yes,
Gabe.
yes.
Thanks for entering. And he says he was listening with a warm smile on his face to our interview with Peter Medak.
Oh, lovely.
That's great. And he loved listening to Melissa and our reminiscences, crouching behind desks and so on during shoots. You and Chris were lovely with Peter.
Well, thank you.
We would love to have Peter on again.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff from Minnesota. Hope you're safe there in Minnesota. My recollection is dim for how he first heard the podcast, but he thinks he might have found us through the HLOT subreddit, which is cool. Thanks, Reddit readers.
Yes, thank you.
And then another Chris from York, PA, listening since day one. Huge Homicide fan. Brilliant. He was in the stands at Memorial Stadium when we did the one at the baseball game.
Oh, cool. Fantastic.
That's great. And he ran into Peter Garrity while he was walking home, carrying his wardrobe or his dry cleaning. He was such the nicest guy.
Nice.
Great show. Huge impact on the community. That's great. And then I think our farthest entry was from Candace in Australia, who says, big Homicide fan, came across the podcast because of Reed Diamond. I watched the show as a teenager in South Africa. It helped me set my course as a creative person. And also the crime and demographics of Baltimore was very similar to South Africa as well, as my uncle was a homicide cop.
Oh,
so
wow.
I love all the people who have a personal, really feel a personal connection to the show. And some people we've also gotten notes who said the show actually influenced what they did. I think, Chris, you mentioned before, we have a listener who became a police officer because of the show.
Yes, there was a listener. I'd have to go for our social media to find their name, but there was a listener who became a police officer, and there's another one who's become a judge as well. So Homicide's inspired people in many ways, which is
So
fantastic.
thanks,
So,
everyone. That
mm,
was a sample of our entries.
yes,
So thanks, everybody, and I'll get that
thank you.
script out. And we did also want to mention we have jumped up from spot number 43 to spot number 39 on FeedSpot in the list of top 100 Baltimore podcasts. So we're moving.
Nice. What happens when we get to number one then? I mean, that'd
No,
be really interesting.
then we're super famous and we're
Do we get the
millionaires.
key to the city or something, you know?
And then also we wanted to thank we've had 2 contributions on our Buy Me a Coffee page from Tracy
Yes.
and from an anonymous supporter, and we wanted to thank the support from them, and also just to remind people, if you feel like supporting us, you can go to buymeacoffee.com and find our Homicide Life on the Set page.
Yeah, fantastic. And there's a bit more news for Homicide. So first of all, Homicide will be showing on Charge TV, which is a channel. I know very little about this channel, but you know more about it than I do, so I'll let you explain.
Yes, looks like Stephanie mentioned to me it would be on Charge TV, and it looks like here in Baltimore, it's over the air on channel 45, the digital channel 45.4, but it's also available on Xfinity, channel
Yeah.
210, Xfinity 1181, Verizon 465, Dish Network 290, YouTube, and Sling TV. So, and it looks like they're streaming. It says they're airing Son of a Gun and Shot in the Dark
Mm.
January 21st. So they must have just started because those were, I think, episode 3 and 4. So they must have just started airing them. And if you want to find out more, go to watchcharge.com and search for Homicide, Life on the Street.
And one other bit of news, the ATX TV Festival, which is running from the 28th of May to the 31st of May this year, will have a special on Three Men and a Dina. And
Oh,
yeah, and so they got Tom Fontana, David Simon, and Carl Secor are going to be on stage talking about that episode. So
and what was
yeah,
that
if you
again?
get a
The
chance to go to
ATX Film Festival?
ATX TV Festival in Austin, Texas. So if you get a chance to do that, that's
Oh,
28th to the 31st of May this year. So you better get some good barbecue and talk about
that's
Homicide. So
right.
there we go. What more could you ask for?
We'll keep an eye out and see
Mm,
if those interviews end up on YouTube or someplace we can point people to.
yes. Cool. Well, is there anything else or is
I just wanted to mention, so we have Stephanie Fontana, Chris Dingess, and Sunil Nayar on today. Stephanie, I just wanted to mention, Stephanie started on the show in 1994 as a production assistant, did 14 episodes as a PA, and
Yep.
then also has credits as assistant to the producer, which would have been to Tom, and then ended up as writer's assistant and in the writer's office, and did 89 episodes um, between 95 and 99, so 103 episodes
Wow.
total. Sunil was in a different capacity. He was in New York and he was assisting Tom in New York, and you'll hear more about that. Started in 97, so he was on the last 3 seasons, 97, 98, 99, and worked on 40 episodes. And Chris Dingus started season 6, so was on 2 seasons, 1997 and 98, for about 46 episodes. And you
Mm,
will absolutely enjoy hearing about how they started. And I got a note from Stephanie yesterday. I just wanted to read part of it where she talks about, since moving on from Homicide, they look back at how they learned the ropes on the show, and that they all credit Homicide as giving them a solid education and a base for success in making television. That said, it has never been as good, still the best job we ever had. And they've all gone on to be producers, writers, showrunners from starting at the bottom. So anybody who
mm,
wants to get in the
mm,
film business, don't let anybody tell you not to start at the bottom, because it works to start at the
mhm.
bottom and watch how everything is done as you move up.
Yeah. Learn how to make good coffee. good tea, and you'll be fine.
And have a good attitude. You got to have a good attitude.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've worked with camera assistants or operators or DPs that said they would rather have somebody with less experience who had a good attitude than somebody that was over experienced or really experienced and had a crappy attitude. So
Yeah, it's because it's ultimately it's a bit like camping. You're all just clubbed together as a team for in a very pressured environment, away from friends and family for significant periods of time. So if you're not getting on with each other, it becomes quite unpleasant. So yeah.
especially on series TV, and I'm going to use the term back in the day because now series TV often is 8 episodes, maybe 6, 8, 10 episodes. We were working 23 episodes from the fall until the spring, many, many, many months, 8, 9 months together, 12 hours a day. So
there we go. We'll jump into the episode and then we will catch you on the other side. I hope you enjoyed us as much as we did. So Stephanie, Chris, Sunil, welcome to Homicide Life on the Set. It's great to have you on. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
hey, everybody. And Sunil, hi to Sunil, who I've never met.
I know.
Or maybe
so
met
nice
and
to meet
forgot.
you. We might have met. We both realized we were at Yaphet's wedding, but I don't know if we met there.
I'm going to go find pictures
Oh,
of that.
actually, Susan was telling me about her gift to Yaphet for the wedding many years ago. It's a George Foreman grill, wasn't it? I think he was very happy.
It was on the list. I was the only person to give him a George Foreman grill. And he came up to me on the set and said, "You gave me the best present." I was like, okay, well,
That's fabulous.
He loved it.
That's
So funny.
great.
I had worked with him on a couple other things, so I think he sort of felt, a little closer to me or something. I don't know.
Last night I was going through my little keepsake box and I actually found the invitation to Yaphet's wedding,
Holy
wow.
moly.
which was sent
Wow.
certified mail. And apparently I missed it when I first sent it. But I thought that was really funny that I still
They
had
sent
it.
it back.
That's amazing.
Funny. I have to dig
Yeah.
and see if I have that. That's fun. But yeah, I have
Thank
great
you notes
pictures
in there
from that.
too.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
That's really
Aw,
cool.
That's nice.
It was Yaphet Kotto's wedding. Of course I was saving it.
And it was at the Cloisters here for Baltimoreans
Yeah, it was
listening. It
gorgeous.
was at the Cloisters here, which is just a beautiful property. It was outside. And he was Jewish. And so it was a Jewish wedding, with the, breaking the glass and the chuppah and all that. It was really nice. It was a pretty wedding.
Oh, super cool.
It was very pretty. It was also 1,000 degrees outside.
Yeah. And he had that choir singing that was beautiful.
Yeah. It was a Jewish wedding, but there was also the Nation of Islam was present and in attendance. It was very it was great. It was,
Yeah.
people
It
from
was
all
very
sorts of factions.
multi-denominational.
Inclusive.
Yeah.
And who we've never
Inclusive.
seen each other dressed up before. So it was everybody's going around like, hey, you look great. Hey, you look in a nice dress. Never seen you in a dress. Oh, you're in a tux. I love it. That was fun.
I thought it was great that he invited so many people from the show.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, exactly. It had a very family feel for sure. And he lived right out here. I go by where he had a house in Owings Mills. I go by there every Saturday morning when I go to my protest. Let's not get into that, but yeah, every Saturday morning for 8 months.
It's a whole nother podcast.
Doing good work.
House. Anyway,
Excellent. Well,
so cool. Go, Chris.
Well, I was just going to say thank you again for joining us. And I was just going to go into, if you could tell us a little bit about your sort of backgrounds and your pathways into film production. So I'll kick off with Stephanie, as you're to my right at the moment. So I'll let you start us off.
Well, my intro into film production was, I'm a Nepo baby, I guess. Is one way to say
Oh, you're
it.
trending now.
Yeah, I mean, so I was, I first, I was exposed to television because of Tom. My first visits to set were for when he was shooting St. Elsewhere. I got to visit set and I was visiting and I was told by my other uncle who was working in props at the time that we had to be very quiet during takes. And so my sister and I literally sat there and held our breath. So that was really fun. And it was a great episode. It was, an episode that starred Blythe Danner and I believe ultimately won an Emmy. It was called The Women. And then my second time on set, he was shooting a pilot called High, that didn't make it on the air because it was the same year that 90210, Beverly Hills 90210 premiered. So they didn't get on the air, but it also starred Gwyneth Paltrow. And I got to be an extra, and I shared the screen with Gwyneth Paltrow in that one. So I think it's really interesting that both my first times on set were with the Paltrows, Blythe Danner and being her mother and all. And then, and of course, Bruce Paltrow was the reason that Tom got into television as well. So I thought that was pretty funny.
And how old were you then?
See, the first visit was middle school, and then the second time was high school. And then after that, when I was graduating college, I got a call from Tom, and he said, we got picked up for Homicide, had done the first 2 seasons, and he said we got picked up for a third. Do you have any plans? And at that point, I was like, do I go to grad school or not? And he talked me into just coming and checking it out. He said, be a set PA and see, if you like it or not. Because I was interested in film. But we didn't have film at my college. And so I was a communications major, and I was exposed to some editing and whatnot, but not really film. We did little commercial bits here and there, but it wasn't film heavy school. So I was very lucky. But I did enjoy it, obviously, and I stuck with it.
Fantastic. Sunil, can you tell us a little bit about your sort of background and how you made it into film and TV?
Yeah, I started in theater, actually, at the Public Theater in New York in casting. And it was a great time to be there, a time of real just sort of, it was a revitalization of that theater. And so I just got to sort of be there for a while and learn, how vibrant New York was. And then ended up becoming a casting director at ABC Primetime, where I then started working with like all the TV writers and producers, and it was awesome. But I always wanted to be a writer. And after a while, it was getting frustrating putting everyone together to go do the fun thing, and by chance, there was this bar, and I spent yesterday trying to look up the name of it. Maybe Chris or Steph, you remember it. It's where Dean Winters used to bartend on Union Square. Anyway, there was a bar on Union Square, and I met Tom there. And Dean Winters was still bartending at the time. And I remember talking to Tom, and then I went back another night, and that was the second time I talked to Tom was when I discovered he was a TV producer. And he was the first TV producer who I'd ever met who didn't mention it within the first 3 seconds. And that was already like incredibly charming.
Didn't give you his resume, right?
He didn't like lead off with it. And there was already and I already liked the guy. And then I found out he did Homicide. And then I found out he did St. Elsewhere, which is my favorite show of all time. And so it connected me to this guy, and I was amazed that I was getting to know him. And at that time, Sean Jablonski, who was his assistant, was finishing up his run and told me that, Tom has this beautiful opportunity where you sign on to learn from him for 2 years. And if you don't stink, you get a chance. And I just thought, well, that's the dream opportunity. And so I applied for the job, and fortunately, he gave it to me. And it really started me ending up here today.
Yeah, and so many people talk about that sort of apprenticeship and how unique that was, and how Tom brought people in and trained people up, and how many people came out of the show that started like you guys as producers or production assistants and became producers and writers and had been working in the business ever since. It really is quite the situation that he created that it's really great to hear about, because I didn't know that before this podcast. I didn't know, So Chris, we have 2 Chris's today.
Yeah,
so this is Chris Dingess. So,
oh, yeah. You can just call me Dingess if you want.
Dingess. So for you, where'd you start and how did you get, and you're from Alexandria. Also, I didn't know that, right?
Well,
was it I
was born in Alexandria. I grew. That was where the hospital was. That ended up on IMDb.
Okay.
I grew up in in Maryland in a town called Akakeek outside of Washington D.C. It was in Prince George's County, as Sue will know. You always know someone's from Maryland when they start describing the county that they lived in, as opposed to the actual town.
Or what high school you went to, yeah.
Or what high school you try to think if you played them in football or something. But so I went to Towson's and I studied specializing in film and television there. And Towson had like film stuff, and there were a couple of really great teachers there. But the main thing I got out of it was an internship my last year on a movie that was shooting in Baltimore. It was an Agnieszka Holland movie called Washington Square.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was the production office intern, and I got to run stuff to set one time, and I was walking down a normal Baltimore street with row houses and everything, with mail or call sheets or whatever in my backpack. And then I turned a corner, and the street was suddenly dirt, and there were horse-drawn carriages and people walking around in period garb, and it was like really kind of getting hit in the face with like Hollywood magic of it all.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I have to figure out a way to keep doing this, which I don't know how I'm going to do because this is Baltimore and there's not a ton of this. But that internship led into the person in charge of that internship was a woman named Stanley Cohen, who was amazing. And she got me, after that, she got me a PA job on a movie called For Richer or Poorer, which
Mm-hmm.
shot around Baltimore. And I stopped going to college. I never graduated because I owed money for like library books or parking fines or something. I don't remember. And I was like, well, I wanted to get in this I got into school to get into this business, and I'm in the business. So I guess I'm done with school. And then that PA job led me to Homicide.
I had a question. So Stanley Cohen is Artist Cohen's daughter, correct?
She was Artist Cohen's daughter.
Who was
yeah.
a makeup and hair on Homicide.
Yeah, Artist had I think Artist had left the show by the time I was there for the last 2 seasons. And I think Artist had left.
Okay.
And she would come in to do like some day playing stuff every once in a while, I think. But had left the show by that point. But yeah, Stanley was her daughter.
Right. So how did you all? So once you got interested in film, and once you got into either the production office or as Tom's assistant, what led you to stay in that route? Because obviously, a lot of production assistants, they get a chance to see all the different departments, and some people, get like Paul Flinton went into sound, and some people get interested in other departments. What was interesting about staying in the production vein? Stephanie, you start.
Well, I think that, well, first of all, I was a set PA, and I loved every minute of that. And I think that was a really great introduction to television production. And everybody on our show was so kind and so willing to educate me in what they did in their departments. I would stand by every department, locking up set or whatnot. And it was very informative times. But I did get a call from Jim Finnerty during our hiatus between the 3rd and 4th season. And he said, I think you should be in the writer's office. And I was like, okay. and I mean,
right. You don't say no to Jim Finnerty, right?
Yeah. I was like, if you see that for me, maybe I should try it. No, but I think I could have easily gone down the route of being an AD because I have that sort of nature of, wanting to be very organized and, on time and all this. But, so I said, okay, I'll try it. Why not try it? Just kind of the reason I was there in the first place is to see if I like this business. And I went into the writer's office, and we were so lucky to have such an amazing writing staff. Again, very generous people. And it was like a master class. Definitely. I mean, the whole experience for me was better than the possibility of going to the possibilities that graduate school was ever going to offer. So, I worked with those writers for so long, and then I kept working for writers, and I stayed an assistant to writers and showrunners for a very long time. And I realized that is the writing aspect I loved about it, everything about it. But the fact that I realized after working on Homicide with all these amazing, incredibly talented, on one of the best shows on television, it was incredibly intimidating. And I was like, I don't think I want to be a writer. So but I did the next best thing. I continued working with writers. and I feel like that's what drove me to continue going on the route that I was on. And when I moved into being an executive at a small production company, I was still working with writers, and that's what brings me joy, is that sort of creative relationship.
And this may be a question for later, but in what capacity are you working with the writers when you're a producer / executive producer, assistant producer, writing producer, whatever? Like, what are you reading? Are you editing? Are you encouraging? What's that job?
You mean when I was still assisting, or when I became an executive?
Well, I guess let's just stick when you were assisting.
Okay. So yeah. every level of my job basically did the same thing, I feel like. Just so when you start out as a writer's assistant, we were reading the scripts, and on Tom's shows, on Homicide and the ones that I worked on beyond that, every assistant in the office read the script. We all proofread them. And I can get into that a little bit later when we talk about what the job really entailed. But then when I would bump up as my coworkers would bump up, like I'm sorry, not coworkers, but the people I worked for, they would get bumped up to producers or supervising producer. And then I think that's kind of why I ended up as a producer's assistant, is because Julie Martin and Jimmy Achimura went from staff writer or story editors to being a producer themselves. And then they were afforded an assistant. So then the title that I got became,
Right.
producer's assistant. But it was essentially the same job every year. We just did whatever they needed us to do. And then when I moved on to being a showrunner's assistant, which was a little bit later after I moved into LA and such, but that really was about being you sort of have your hands in like every aspect of production at that point, because you are the conduit. You're it's a little bit of a power position sometimes, because everybody has to come through you. You're the gateway. So you are working with every department,
right,
in that capacity. I don't know. Sunil could probably speak to that even more so, because he was Tom's showrunner assistant for a very long time. And then at a certain point, one of the showrunners that I worked for, Tom Spezialy, he got a job he got a deal at Disney, which was it's called an overall deal. And the overall deal was basically a development deal. And so it would just be him and I in the office, and, he would be working through ideas, story ideas, concepts. And he trusted me enough to, I would sit in the room with him and we would talk about those ideas and work through them. And, I would assist him in that process as well. So it's about, developing the process. It's like having another body in the room to bounce ideas off of.
Sure. And Sunil, what made you stick with producing / writing / production?
Yeah, well, first I want to say, though, Steph as an exec is awesome. And everybody should get a chance to work with her. I've had the luxury of doing it, so she didn't get to answer that part. But but also to speak to what Stephanie's talking about is like, the assistants in these environments are these sort of unseen guiding hands that are really incredible, and it's like they don't get enough credit as part of the creative process, I think, a lot of times, for exactly what Stephanie's talking about. So I just think it's great that you guys are doing this, because they are sounding boards for the people whose names are on the screen,
right?
And I just think it's like so critical. And so I will say, to answer your question, taking this, getting the job of Tom's assistant is, winning the lottery. And it's different than I think a lot of these other jobs, because one sort of takes it with intention. Like, I would like to follow in that guy's footsteps and maybe learn how to do it. And so, for me, it was more, I won the lottery because I got to learn a thing I was interested in from the one person who could teach me how to do it the way he did it. And that has blessed, I think, my whole career. But so I got to start thinking, well, I get to learn how to see all this. And so I just got to learn. It was like going to graduate school, honestly, is what it was. And, and I started as Tom's assistant the day they picked Oz up to series also. So I also got to sit there and watch him create HBO's first drama while he did Homicide. And again, I got paid for it. And so for me, it was a no-brainer to be like, well, this is what I think I'm going to try to stick with. And hopefully, I don't disappoint the lineage of the assistants who came before me, because that was the other thing, to be like, I'm not going to be the one who screws this up when you're looking at the Jablonskis and the Anya Epsteins and the Julie Martins. You're like, I can't be the one. They're like, what happened to that guy? And so it really sort of, it inspires you to do good work.
Stay
Anyway,
in
I
the
got
hot
really
seat.
lucky.
Right.
Oh, yeah, big time.
That's great. Cool. And how about you, Chris?
Well, just real quick, I can say, just as an outside observer to how things worked in Tom's office, I don't know any showrunner that has the deal going with the assistants where they literally are learning how to write and run a television show. It really is almost like a graduate class. Like, you're literally doing some of, like, helping him do the work that I've never seen before with any showrunner. I didn't stay in the production office or production. I quickly, like, I was there for 2 years, but I was able in that time to you had Tracy, Greer, and Kathy on, and Greer and Tracy were my bosses. And I quickly, like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to, like, my main goal was to try and, like, just do whatever I was told, stay out of the way and observe and pick something up. And one thing that I picked up quickly from watching Tracy and Greer, I was like, I'm never going to have my shit together as well as they do to do anything to keep a show going like this. Like,
They were amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah. This is not gonna pan out for me. And I would when I would get to go to set, I would look at other department, and I was sort of like, I mean, I guess I could drive a truck, but I'm a terrible driver. I was just observing. And, like, I was like, maybe I could be a grip. And Jim Finnerty was like, I don't think you're a grip. And I was like, okay, you're right. I'm not a grip. Like, I was like, what about camera? And I would watch you guys, and I was like, there's a lot of math in that. I'm not doing that.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know there was math in it. You should have asked me. I would have said no math.
The moment I saw you guys bust out a tape measure, it was like, not for you.
Oh, yeah. And that was critical. Yeah. You had to keep those numbers in your head. That's for sure.
Exactly. And numbers don't stay in my head. Usually, if I haven't seen it on a television screen,
so this was a process of elimination for you, huh?
I know.
Yeah, I always liked.
And you're like, what involves drinking and typing?
Yes. I always did like writing, sort of, and I always liked coming up with a bunch of bullshit and then writing it down. So when Homicide got canceled, one of the writers, and like, oh God, what am I going to do with my life? Luckily, one of the writers, Debbie Sargent, got a job in New York. So I moved into the writer's office there, and then kind of worked my way up.
Cool. So maybe that's that's interesting. So for you, it was a process of elimination for you. It wasn't like, let me follow my passion. It was like, let me figure out the passion, right?
I was like, I went to college for 4 years, and I'm so ill-equipped for this actual business. What am I going to do?
That's true. Right.
Yeah.
Unless you made films in college or for outside people, there wasn't a whole lot of crossover there. Yeah.
And there's no films in film school. I don't know what I did. I don't know. Maybe I was high the whole time, but 4 years went by.
That's a lie.
No. So that's how I ended up. Yeah, switching out.
That's great. As a camera assistant, I'm on the set. I literally have no clue what some of these titles mean. So why don't you go through and tell us, like, in what capacity each of you worked on the show, and what was a day like? What did you do? What did you do? Whether you worked on the set, whether you were in New York with Tom, whether you were on the back of the camera truck waiting for the film, So Stephanie, you start. What was a day like in the position? And you can tell us the day like in more than one of those positions, because obviously being on the set as a production assistant, it's going to be different than being in the writer's office as an assistant. So
What were those skill sets?
So on set, my day would be getting there at the crack of dawn. We were pretty much the first line of defense on the set, and so I would go towards the end of that season that I first was on. I was bumped up to run the extras. So my day would start with meeting them as they were coming in, and I would do the paperwork with them, sign them in, and sort of wrangle them and be there when they were called.
And what season? I'm sorry. What season did you start?
Third season.
Third, okay.
But my responsibilities were, we would be locking up set, which is just, sometimes standing at corners telling people, please don't walk down the street. Which is always fun when you're, a 21-year-old girl, and, when we're in these really, scary neighborhoods sometimes that, there's gunshots going off around the corner. It was the gritty streets of Baltimore. And, trying to tell people, could you just stay here for one thing?
Don't
Strangely, they would.
street.
Yeah, don't cross the street. Yeah, strangely, they would listen to you. Somehow maybe having the walkie on gave us a little bit of authority. That was the big part of the job. I also held the petty cash, which meant I did a lot of copy runs for the crew and the actors. I would go into the actors the hair and makeup trailer and get their orders in the morning. And
I was running the extras, and I actually was, like I said, I was in charge with the petty cash at one point, and that meant a lot of coffee runs. But also, I was in charge of the brick phone, the cell phone that we had. That was
giant cell phone.
Giant. So I had to carry that. There's a great picture of me like here on the phone with the walkie and all that. It was a lot of stuff I carried around. But that just meant that I was my job entitled being that I had to communicate with the production office a lot too. They would call this, or people would use it to call the production office when we were on locations that you couldn't reach them. Because I know Kathy explained that we had the access; they could listen to us. But so I had the phone and the beeper and all of that. And then as the writer's assistant, that job, like I think I mentioned earlier, that we would all proof the scripts. That was a huge part of it, obviously. But my job, I was lucky to be one of the people who did the clearances for names. I work with the clearance company to clear the scripts. And so anything that we would get these reports that if something did not clear, and then the writers would have to change it, or we'd have to find an alternate, for those items. And that also meant that I was clearing the names for the board, which was really fun. And I 100% went through my yearbook, and I would clear all the names of the people I grew up with and put them on the board. Which is really fun, because now when I see the show, I'm like, oh yeah, look at that name and that,
right.
and then
crew people. There were many crew names on there, including me. I was a dead person on the board at some point.
Yeah, anybody that I could use, I would, that would clear. And it's really fun because I think Chris, you probably saw it in Cooper's Tavern. He's got one of the copies of the board up in there, so it's just fun because it is a little bit of a piece of iconic history, right? That that I got to be a part of that little process.
Quick question on the board, the one in Cooper's. So was that did you have a new board each season, or was that just one? Because it seemed to be that particular board looked like it was a season 5 or 6. I couldn't quite tell. And I was chatting with Reed Diamond about it. We couldn't figure out which season it was
right,
from.
because I do think that one had Kellerman on it, right? So it definitely meant that it was post season 3. Well, I don't know. I feel like Kathy and Greer and I have had this conversation trying to figure out why, what did we do with the boards? That's probably more of a question for the props department when you have them on. They would definitely know. They would know. Or set deck, they would definitely know the answer to that. But I'm assuming that at one point we switched out the boards.
I can tell you where one board ended up is when later in life we were working in New York and Tom got a firehouse down on the Lower East Side where he shot a pilot, but he also set up offices and rented out the space. And I lived on the Lower East Side. So we'd work out of this firehouse that was also a bit of just a holding thing. And in there was the board.
Really?
Oh, cool.
And it was like Raiders of the Lost Ark being like, what is it doing here in this? And it would just sit there. And you're like, this is a piece of TV history. And it was just sitting in a firehouse on the Lower East Side of New York. And I honestly don't know whatever happened to it, but that's where one of the main boards was.
So it didn't end up going back to Tom's house/office. Didn't go back to that space?
I hope it made it back there because I don't know whatever happened after the firehouse, but I hope it's somewhere
I'm pretty sure
safe.
he still has it because we had that conversation too when I said, "Oh, the board is hanging in Cooper's," and he said, "But I have the board." So clearly he doesn't know the answer to that question either. Why we have multiple boards? But because we've talked about, I think he still has it somewhere in storage. Yeah.
Interesting.
Did the original board get messed up when Junior Bunk shot up the squad room before we redid it? That's probably why it was two.
Oh, that's a good point.
Two boards.
Good question. Did it?
That's probably also why it's between 5 and 6. Because it was the end of season.
That makes sense.
I think, or was it the end of season 6 where he shot?
I think it was the end of season 6
where he shot up the place.
Yeah. Does that mean Catherine Bigelow has a board as well?
She might. She might.
But again, I think, when you have the props people on, put that on as a question because I feel like everybody needs to know the answer.
Yes, and we are in touch with them and lots of other people who we haven't had on yet. So, yeah,
Great.
Absolutely.
And so, so that was the fun part. And then we also created, the writer's assistant maintained a Bible of the series. Which literally was the writer's assistants typing up all of the details that would come up in the episodes. So, when you learn that Girardello has a son, that gets put in there. You learn how old Girardello's son is, we put that in there. Right. It was the minutia so that if there was a question, because, we had computers, but there was no internet. So it's not like we could track things the way that the internet tracks it now and could probably tell you how old Girardello's son was at the time. But, so that was our reference point for the writers. When they had a question, they'd come out, Jim Yoshimura would pop his head out and be like, what is Kellerman's mom's name? You'd be like, oh, wait, we did put that in at some point.
Was this like a handwritten, like loose leaf or what? How did you compile it?
We typed it up. It was a 3-ring notebook. It was typed up.
I love it.
So
great.
that was something, and generally a bunch of the shows after that I worked on, anything that was episodic in the sense that it would or had I think most shows have them still, right, guys? Don't you think that most shows maintain it? The writers,
I think you'd have to have
do.
one. Yeah.
When you're a serialized show, that's definitely something you want to be tracking. It's just probably done a little bit more sophisticated these days.
Right.
I'm still working on Bibles from shows when I was an assistant. I never finished any of them.
Yeah, exactly.
I gave up at a certain point. I wasn't a good writer's assistant either.
They were never finished, though. That was the thing, right? Until the very end of a series, they were never finished,
Right.
Just abandoned.
Yeah, exactly. We also had a script format sort of guide that I believe Joy Lesko put it together. And we had, because Tom had a lot of rules, style rules, and we would follow them to the T. It would be things like, how do we spell the word donut on this show? Because is it D-O-N-U-T or, the alternate spelling. So if it was down to that, we had those references because some writers would spell it a different way, but we always kept them spelled the same way. We also had, we would double space the in between sentences. We what was the one thing that Tom does, he caps.
You capitalize the character's name every single time you mention the character.
Yeah. Yes, which is not done.
I've never seen it since.
No, exactly. But in Tom's office, we always do that. Yeah. That's a big one. And that was a hard one to get past after working for him. Like every time I'd be proofing scripts, I'd be like, don't you want to capitalize this?
Right.
So yeah, we definitely had our quirks that were all maintained in this style Bible. But also you just kind of learn that the English language a little bit goes out the window, the spelling of words, made up words. I don't know. You just sort of roll with it. And then the other thing that was it? I'm trying to remember what else I did. That was we made the copies of the scripts. That was a big thing. I know Greer mentioned that they made copies of scripts in the production office as well. We made a lot of them from our end, and we used to call it Homicide Life Killing Trees because there were so many scripts. And then when the copier would break down, you would just be throwing out stacks of paper, So there was one time where we put the script out, the writer's office put it out, and it got to set. And then I would go to set after I was done in the writer's office, and Frank Farrell's like leafing through the script, and he's like, there's no scene numbers here. And that was a huge mess up on our part that nobody caught that before it got published. And I will say to this day that we were all just so mortified that we had let Tom down in this moment. So, we recalled all the scripts, and then we went back into the office and published scripts late into the night that night. So that was a learning.
There were multiple different versions of scripts. And I have like 120 scripts here I kept. And when I went through them to catalog them, it was only 62 episodes I have scripts for because so many were double and triple versions of the script, with whether it was the gold, whether it was a whole blue script or a whole green script or multiple colored script. But there was like you were producing multiple scripts for every episode too, which is just kind of mind-boggling that all that was done mechanically in the offices there.
Yes, the revisions. I think that Greer and Kathy and Tracy explained that too. That we have different colors for different revisions, and sometimes it would be a full revision for whatever reason. If the network notes or something came in that really changed the nature of the episode.
I think if you have changes, even on one word on a page, if it's more than half of the pages, you go to a full revision, right? I think that's the rule. I don't know.
No, that was the rule. We had that. Yeah, that was also in the style guide. That if there was a certain amount of pages that had revision markers on it, you would go to a full. That is true. So that that was the bulk of our job was the scripts, and then we would be back in the day, be FedExing them out. Our office FedExed them to the studio and network out in Los Angeles. We also every morning would get in the fax from Tom with the revisions that he had handwritten in New York. And that was, that would get incorporated by the writers, that was the notes. But that's how that was transpired back then, was he would send the pages with his little red pen notes all over them via fax. I think my other big job was throwing parties for the crew.
Yay! Thank you.
No, it was Greer and Tracy and I took on having the Christmas party every year at the apartment that I stayed in, which was Tom's apartment. That he was always in New York, so he let us do that, and that was a lot of fun. Being able to do that for the crew, and then obviously I translated that many years into the future of throwing the reunion.
Yes, great job.
Pulling it together.
Yeah, well done with that. That was really cool.
Really quite the organization to get that. I can't imagine how many people you had to contact for that and get people.
It was a lot of fun, and you guys were a big inspiration for why that came to be. I think that, listening to the podcast was very nostalgic, and then when it coincided with it coming out on Peacock, I just said to Tom, people are asking, they want to get together. Would you want to do this? And I said, I'll help put it together. And he's like, go for it. So it was great.
That's so
I
cool.
mean, it
Really
was so
great.
wonderful to see all the reviews that came out when it hit Peacock, that were so loving and I was just so proud of everybody.
Absolutely. And it was about this time last year, wasn't it?
Yeah. We had it was in
November,
November.
right?
It was,
Like,
yeah. We're coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, this time last year I was on the plane flying out there.
Wow. Right.
We also were the communication between we would communicate with Sunil and Tom's office on a regular basis, making plans. I did a lot of the travel for the writers too, because we did do post in New York whenever they would go up for a couple days for post on their episodes. And I would be part of that process of getting them to and from New York. So I was a little bit of a travel agent. You're a little bit of a chameleon, I guess, when you're an assistant. You take on a lot of different
Jack of all trades, right?
Yeah.
So Sunil, you had a much different experience, I would think, being in the office in New York as things were being literally hatched. So if you want to talk about what the heck that was like, that must have been really fascinating too.
It was pretty fascinating. I mean, and Steph touched on it a little bit that it's an amazing place to be the showrunners, to be Tom's assistant, because everything has to go to him. And so, once you start that job, you realize first how big the job is. But it's the luxury of getting to communicate with every department and start learning how it works. And Tom, legendarily writes longhand first thing in the morning. And so as his assistant, you just sort of wait, you get to the office, you do all the things you're doing, but what you're mostly doing is waiting for him to come down with that day's work. And again, as a wannabe writer, it's the dream. You're having a great writer bring you handwritten pages every day that you get to look at. You get to fax to Baltimore, or you get to put into the show you're shooting. And so that was always the first task of the day, was to dive into Tom's writing and to dive into the writing of everybody else in Baltimore. And so it's again, it's awesome. And then the rest of it is kind of, again, what Stephanie touched on is the coordination of everything that was happening. And we were at the Chelsea Piers at the time, sort of on one floor. So the editing bays were right there. Everything was right there. So again, as his assistant, I got to talk to all the actors, all the directors, everybody who came through, because, all the writers who came up. And so it was partly just getting to make sure everything ran well in the New York end of it, while people like Stephanie made sure you did all the work, really, and I got to kind of just funnel it through and learn how Tom did what he did.
What was Tom's handwriting like? Because reading people's handwriting can be quite tricky.
Could you read it?
It's pretty, it's not awful. It's legible. It's not like you'll see it immediately and know it, but it's doable. I think there were a few times that I had to say, and I will say the huge irony for me is when I started as Tom's assistant is right again when Oz got picked up and just things started to grow. And so I somehow managed to convince him that I kind of needed an assistant. And so he hired someone, that was Shannon.
Assistant, love it.
Who we brought on. But it was because he was getting big enough. I mean, it was because wonderfully there was enough that mattered every single day to the job that sort of the other things were not going to get taken care of because I was just one person. And to his credit, he realized that needed to get done. So, I, again, was luxurious that I don't think I really ever had to go get lunch because everything else is on the front burner creatively. And so, again, I got super, super lucky. And the fact is that depending on your showrunner, this job is either the best or the worst job you could possibly have in this industry. And
I could imagine.
For me, it was the best.
Yeah. And so when you say you fax the pages to Baltimore, are you putting them into the template into script form? Are you typing them up, or does that get sent to the writer's office in Baltimore to be done?
I think, and Stephanie, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think I just faxed his handwritten pages down to Baltimore and those changes got put in there. And I'm conflating that and Oz, I think, because I can't remember if I ever directly put changes into a Homicide script. I don't feel like I did.
No, you would type up his scripts if he was his original draft. You would type up his original draft, and then when he would have the printed version of the script, and then he would write notes on it, changes, and then he would send those to us. And then it would be mostly it was on the writer to put those changes into the script. If not, then it was the script coordinator who put them in, or one of us if she wasn't around. But I think generally speaking, the writer gets the notes from Tom, and then, although Sunil, it might have been possible that if it was Tom's script, you might have been doing those changes.
Yeah, if it was Tom's script.
If he was written by, but if he was giving notes on somebody else's script and sending those on to us, then that writer would be responsible for making those changes. Because sometimes they weren't exacting. They were like, make this better, or something like that, where they would have to do a rewrite.
Well, and again, also to what we were saying earlier, is that's Tom's way of mentoring. Is he doesn't just tell you what you're supposed to do. He gives you a sense and then trusts you to go do it. And that was the other thing that I saw as a person who trusted the people that he worked with, and so it wasn't prescriptive. And I really, again, I got to learn from someone who did it really remarkably well.
I guess I should clarify that there'd be two versions of like what we'd be getting from New York, right? There's the notes on the script that Tom would send to the writers. Say the writer put out their first draft, that the writer definitely would put in. But if Tom was sending changes, actual revision page changes, right, I'm sure we put them in exactly the way he wanted them. If that makes sense. So,
Sure.
The writer would have an opportunity to make their, when they're doing their drafts, they would, he said, oh, this isn't working, make this better or something, then they could come up with something. But if it was actually already a published draft, Tom would give revision notes. That said, the writers also did revision notes on their own as well.
Right.
And they would do that based on going to, if they went on a tech scout or they met with the director, those changes would get inputted.
The other thing, and I got lucky, and then I'll pass it over to Chris, is I happened to also start with him right when he bought the building that he lives in now. And so I got to help him destroy that. I mean, I got to sort of be there for the whole creation of that, which was also just an incredible experience. And, to look into the history of the building and understand, and so it was also a really fun journey to take that with him because, it was him building his home base.
Oh, it's a great story of him like having walked by it so many years and loving the building, and then all of a sudden it's like it's for sale. It's like I'm gonna buy it, and then to turn it into what sounds like really like like an incubator, right? I mean, so he lives there, he works there, he mentors people there. I mean, it really sounds like a fairy tale of the best way to hatch filmmaking ideas and projects. Is that building sounds like the perfect place.
Yeah, it's a magical place.
Yeah,
it's really great.
Chris, so where were we? Chris D, what was your day like?
So
if there was one regular day
that was the one thing I immediately loved about the business is the days were never exactly the same. Yeah. There's always something different going on. But like I'm getting like I'm listening to all this, and then I have to talk, and it's like this is what has happened to this podcast. You went from interviewing cast, directors, to a guy who would change out the mousetrap every morning.
Exactly. Those are the best stories. Come on. We love that.
Were you shooting at the mice like Kathy was?
I did not shoot any mice.
Pigeons.
I don't have that instinct in me. I'd get there in the morning. I'd go, because you've heard before, the office was right on the harbor. And so there were mice and rats, more mice than rats.
Like literally
inside.
On the harbor, like on a pier.
Yeah.
Over I don't know if everybody understands that. A pier literally over the water. We were on the harbor.
And then across the street, there were a bunch of bars and restaurants. And like at night, it was the middle of the night. I got back from doing a film run, and there was a rat the size of a medium-sized dog dragging an industrial black trash bag full of restaurant food across the street. There was no one else. It was just me and this rat. And like the rat just sort of looked at me like, what? And I was like, hey man, do your thing. And the rat kept dragging the bag across the street. It went about its business like a gentleman.
Wow.
I went about my business like a gentleman, and we never crossed paths again.
Wow. But, that's a great story. Was it from Cooper's or the waterfront? Where was he dragging the bag?
I'm guessing waterfront. But it wasn't in the restaurant. This was outside on Main Street everyone had set their trash outside, so who knows? But so you get there in the morning and you empty out the, you check them traps, and then sort of, make sure everything that, like, there's milk and coffee and all of that stuff ready for people. And then once everybody's in and moving and the production's going, you're it's a day filled with doing whatever you're told. That sounds mean. Doing whatever is asked of you.
I think doing whatever you're told is a pretty good description for everybody on the set, basically.
It is, but the way, like, Tracy and Greer were so kind to me. It was never, brutal. And I could test one's patience. But, doing whatever Greer or Tracy needed or what Jim needed, which, it was a lot of running errands, running stuff to set. I would have to open them, like, the fan mail a lot. And
really,
people asking for pictures. And I feel like we had, like, a set of cards that you would send out to them with, like, the reply was a sticker you would stamp on the Homicide card and send out to people. And then eventually when we ran out of photos, it was, sorry, we don't have any photos. But
you weren't forging signatures or
no
anything.
Forging signatures. No, I never got to reply to the fan mail. But there was one person, his name was, and he was from Forest Hills, Queens, New York. And every week he sent like a 3 to 4 page letter on yellow legal pad.
Really?
And it would describe how amazing the episode of the show was. But he would use like there would be half of the page would be adjectives that he had obviously gone through a thesaurus. And he goes, the episode where, and then it would be the TV guide description of the episode. And then it would just be more pages of talking about, each actor's performance. And I was like, wow, this is intense.
That's a super fan. We need to get him on. Is he still alive?
Well, I wish I could say he was a super fan of Homicide. Unfortunately, when I moved to New York and was a writer's assistant on another show, we started getting letters, and someone was like, look at this letter from this guy. And I just saw the yellow legal pad, and I went, is that from Forest Hills, New York? And they're like,
holy,
yeah. And I was like, that son of a bitch.
Oh, wow.
What a tramp. I thought he was Homicide's fan. He just throws it around to anybody. But anyway.
That's so funny.
So
looking them up.
You run errands. I would always run to get lunch. From all over the city. And look, to this day, I love running errands. So it really was a dream job in many regards. Just running errands, running here, running there, getting whatever anybody needed. And then there were times where if somebody on set needed something, I would run out and grab it. That was rare. I didn't really do much on set. One time I was asked to lock up a set and stop people from crossing the street. And just who I am, I was like, my place in this universe, who am I to tell this individual they cannot cross this street? It just doesn't compute in my brain. I'm like, we're all specks of dust in this universe. Who am I, one speck of dust, to tell this other speck of dust you cannot cross? And
I love
it. The ADs quickly realized that, and they're like, get rid of this guy. Send him back to the production office.
Get rid of the hippie.
Yeah, he has call sheets to copy.
I didn't know there was like a universal philosophy that you needed to have to be a PA. I love that. That's actually a thing.
There isn't. It's just who I am.
No, but right. But the fact that you didn't have the universal philosophy you needed to tell people not to cross the street. I love it.
You got to have that really killer instinct. Yeah. And I would have done anything for that show. I just particularly commanding strangers to do stuff. It's one of the few moments in my life where I clutch my pearls, I guess. I don't know.
It's so true. It's so
wasn't
true
for
because
me.
once you get that walkie on, and it's just like it becomes a power thing. So you didn't have that power gene with the
No,
walkie.
I even caught it locked down and locked up, and I think people pointed at me and laughed. It was a very humiliating experience that I buried until now.
I loved
and
it.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
look,
like, I would take any opportunity they would give me to come back to set. There were times when they needed extra PAs and they'd pull me from the writer's office and put me back on set, and I'd be like, yes, let me do it for the day.
oh, I loved being on set.
Yeah.
I just was useless. But, and then at the end of the day, we'd do the call sheets, get the call sheets out, get the scripts out, which Tracy and Greer described perfectly in another episode, in the previous episode, I guess. I would be given a flashlight and then sent into the stages, which were above the production office. It was the squad room. I think it was just the squad room, and maybe there was space for like a swing set somewhere up there, like a little tiny space.
Yeah,
but I
like
think
Barnfather's office and
stuff like that. Yeah. I would have to, you go up the long ramp and then past casting and then another long ramp in the set. You guys had it was either days where you hadn't shot in it, or it was shot earlier. We'd shot out of it earlier in the day. It was pitch black. There were no lights. And I would walk around this cavernous set with a flashlight to make sure there were no animals or unhoused people on the stage.
Wow.
And it was like, they gave me one of those like big long mag lights so I could act like I could do something with it, like take a swing at someone. But for someone who doesn't like to tell people not to cross the street, the thought of coming across a person in the dark, and I was just like, it was terrifying most of the time. And I would find a light switch and turn stuff on while I walked through if I could. But I would always like kind of just stand there in the empty squad room, and like I was always looking at everybody's desk and kind of taking in the awe of the empty space. I was in awe of the empty space, and I would walk around and just look at everything, make sure everything was okay, and then lock up. And then I would drive to set. If we were shooting on set, and then I would wait at the film truck, as Sue has said, and
the tailgate.
I never sat on the tailgate. You said you saw me sitting on the tailgate. I would never do that because I didn't want to be in anybody's way, and I was afraid I would be in someone's way if I was sitting on the tailgate. To this day, as an executive producer of television, I feel like one of my main jobs is to stay out of the way and let people do their job. So you would give me the film, and then I would put it in a mailbag. And like we shot in some questionable neighborhood, some scary neighborhood stuff from like you'd see in The Wire or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I would walk through this neighborhood with thousands of dollars worth of shot film in a messenger bag, and then get in the car, and I would drive it from Baltimore down to Rockville, to where, Tracy described this. You drive it down to Rockville, where Rick from Color Lab was waiting for it, and you would hand the film off, and then try and get back to Baltimore without falling asleep behind the wheel and dying.
I want to get back to the empty set. Did you ever come across any animals or anything else in the empty cavernous set?
I think there was a pigeon once or twice, and maybe a mouse, but I would not shoot them. I would be like, man, I hope that pigeon gets out of here by morning time if it knows what's good for it.
And I can relate to what you said about just standing and looking at the set, the squadron set, because the Vince Perennios and everybody in set dressing that made sure those desks were full of stuff that were particular personality cues to those detectives and what was on the walls. And I mean, it was really an amazing space for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody's desk, it just looked so lived in. Even when they redid it for, I believe, season 7.
Right. After the shootout.
It changed a lot. Yeah. And it was a little bit, just the colors of it were a little bit colder, but yeah, no, walking around the set. And I learned, just all the stuff you picked up, because I went to film school, but I learned nothing. This show really was like actual school for me.
Right.
Like the windows in the box being beveled, and I was like, why are they like that? And then it was like, oh, that's because there's no reflection in it now, and like just stuff you pick up. Like I would pick up just from wandering around this set, hoping there wasn't a murderer behind the corner. Every once in a while, a lesson about filmmaking would seep in.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that was. I'm sure I'm forgetting other stuff, but.
That's great.
That's the stuff
great
I remember.
Stories.
He made really great nachos all the time for everybody.
I would make nachos for everybody. That was a highlight of the day.
Would they have a toaster oven? How'd you make nachos?
What's your secret
in
to
the
them?
microwave? I had worked in a restaurant right before I got the job, and I had learned to make nachos there. I mean, what's the secret? It's just cheese and junk on nacho chips. It was not maybe I would put extra cheese in it. I don't know, but magic would happen in that microwave.
Yeah. Sometimes those are the most important.
Yeah. I was there when Alan Taylor found the mouse in the craft service. I had to handle that mouse.
And that was craft service in the production office, not on the set.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It was a constant, like, it was really like Tom and Jerry, me with the mice. It was a constant battle that I knew I was never going to win. It was a quagmire. I was never going to get out of this battle, this war. But I fought it. I fought it for 2 years, and then my service was done, and I moved on.
I love it. Those are great stories.
Well, thank you for your service.
Shows don't get made without these kind of jobs being done.
It's true.
It's got to be done. Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, the whole thing about either making nachos or getting coffee orders and stuff. When I started as a second assistant camera, I mean, my job with many cameramen, and they were all men, was handing them a freaking cocktail at the end of the night and watching them get in their cars and drive home. Some shows that I was on, one particular, they had to have a blender on the truck so that you could make a frozen margarita and hand it to the cameraman. And when they yelled rap, and John Alonzo always wanted, I think it was scotch or bourbon on the rocks. You'd have to hand it to him because he had somebody, I think, drive him to the set. But yeah, those things, people don't know about those things. And those often are some of the most important. Like if you didn't do that right, you would not have a job. So some of those little tiny things, people think of as, oh, I can't believe you had to get coffee. It's like, yes. And if you do that well, you'll have a job the next year or the next season, and you'll be doing something else. So yeah, all those kinds of very sort of small things make a huge difference. I mean, coffee, just having good coffee or having the grind across the street was a huge morale boost for the crew. It sounds like something tiny, but it was not tiny. No. It was not an insignificant thing at all. It was a huge morale thing.
Oh no,
huge.
Every shoot I've been on, good coffee is required, because it makes a big difference.
Yeah. If you're working for 12 hours a day, it really is the teeny tiny things that keep people happy and awake, and you do what you can to keep morale up.
And you need it. Yeah, you need to have morale up.
Yeah.
So where are we, Chris? Where are we? I'm like losing place. I've got
a nice color coded thing going on here. So I think. Well, I tell you what, why don't we do a funnish question about any memories of your first encounters with like kind of cast or crew in your positions, or any kind of fun stories about when you sort of first turned up on the show?
Don't all speak at once. Go ahead.
Well, I can.
Yeah,
it's funny. Sort of building on Chris's story, the first time I ever came down to Baltimore, I remember, and I was really starstruck because I was a fan of this show. And, and coming from the world of casting, you don't get a cast like this on TV. And so already sort of for my own like humble thing, I couldn't believe I was going to get to be a part of this. And the first morning I had to walk into the writer's office. And again, super intimidated because these are, legends to me. And the first thing that happened was the mouse trap, the sticky trap, it caught this mouse and it was still alive. And I forget who was in the office, but they told me, they're like, get rid of this mouse. And I was like, I guess I'm getting rid of this mouse. And so I put it in a bag and I was like, what do I? And they're like, go throw it outside. And so I walked outside and walked down the street and was suddenly surrounded by cops. And wasn't sure what was going on. And I put this bag in the garbage can and looked around. And then it turned out that they had just discovered like these old munitions above some bar on like, and all the cops showed up for explosives. But it was my first morning. I was like surrounded by cops trying to throw out a rat in the morning or a mouse in the morning. But that was like my welcome. I was like, oh, this is, but it was, for me getting involved in the show was really, it was intimidating. Because this was everything at the highest level, but also in a way that hadn't been done before. And so, getting to meet the directors, getting to meet these writers, getting to meet these actors was, and some of them I had known very vaguely before because I was at the Public Theater, like Andre had done some plays at the Public and a couple other, but just, yeah. So for me, it was really just like a trip into Wonderland.
Pro tip, you put the trap in the bag when you set it. That way, when it goes off, pre-bagged.
I didn't set the trap. I came into the
pre-bagged meat right there for you. You just roll it up and check it.
I always remember at the Public Theater, there was this exterminator who would come by and he loved these mice who were sticking on traps. And he would put them in the bag and then he would take his big boot and just roll over the bag. And I remember the woman who was the literary manager there, this woman named Shelby, saw that. And that's when she learned that her landlord had lied to her about freeing all the mice off of sticky traps. She's like, and the guy's like, no, man, they don't come off of sticky traps. Anyway.
No, sticky traps. Ooh, PETA. Don't call us PETA about sticky traps.
They're gnarly.
Oh, gosh.
I was always racked with guilt at every poor little mouse because I would anthropomorphize them and like think of the, I'm sure they lived in some sort of Sylvanian secret of Nim existence where like no food was being put on the thread spool table for the little ones that night.
The thread spool table. I know why you're a writer. Excellent. So good. I feel like there's like 3 TV series just in that one thing you just said.
Well, just jumping on the theme of trash, I'll go with that as my first encounter was literally. It's pretty funny that was your first encounter in Baltimore, and my first task was also about trash as a PA. Wow. My first day on set was with we weren't actually shooting yet. It was my birthday, the day after the 4th of July in Fells Point. And Miles Perman, who was also one of the PAs at the time. Actually, I want to mention that I know I said I was a Nepo baby. Just to clarify, I was Tom's niece. I'm not Tom's daughter. But also, yes. I was one of 5 PAs that were Nepo babies on that season. So I was not alone. Miles also was related to Barry. So anyway, the 2 of us were tasked with cleaning up this trash can that was laying in front of the pier. And it was after the 4th of July. It's 90 degrees. Ugh. It was piled over. It was, crab legs. It was so disgusting. And I was literally gagging and I was really struggling. And Miles was so sweet. He was just like, I'll take care of it. And he's cleaning it up. And then then Ivan Fonseca, who was an AD at the time, who had just become an AD, he was in charge of us. And he pulls me aside and he says, just because you're Tom's niece, you gotta do the job. You can't not, work hard. And I was just, and he knew nothing about me at the time. I knew nothing about him at the time. And there may or may not have been tears after that encounter. And I'm sure he doesn't remember it. But, obviously he had no concept of my personal work ethic. But, I went on to obviously prove myself. And of course I was going to work my butt off. I didn't take the opportunity lightly. So, but yeah, trash. That was my first encounter.
Yeah, and trash 4th of July in Baltimore or anywhere in the surrounding areas around Baltimore. I know if I go for a walk in my neighborhood after any holiday, when it's a trash day, you got to steer clear of everybody's trash cans because they are going to be full of desiccating, rotten crab parts, which has got to be one of the worst ever smells you ever smelled. So it's that's so true. After 4th of July, trash can full of crab parts is like, oh my God. No wonder you were gagging.
Yeah.
We're really between the trash and the rats. We're really making Baltimore seem like a real.
Well, hey,
Like,
you know, that was it's like
beautiful,
Welcome to Baltimore in 1990, whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's my favorite city ever. Like, please don't judge it based on the stories of this
Oh
episode.
no, it is the best. It's tough. When people say to me, "Where are you going to move when you retire?" Well, first of all, I'll probably never afford to retire, but also it's like, why would I go anywhere? This is besides being a great state, anyway.
Well, I love Baltimore for what it's worth, but I thought it was great.
Well, Ivan and I, you know, we have an awesome relationship. He's basically like a big brother. And I feel like in that, you know, that sort of tracks now that's how our relationship started, you know, that he is now more like a big brother than anything else. But it was an interesting first hour on the job.
It's like everybody's first indication.
Well, certainly it's like Hollywood's not glamorous, you know?
Right.
It's just not. That was my original, you know. My first 2 encounters were on these awesome sets, you know, and being on set itself and under the lights. And this was my first day on the job in glamorous Hollywood, was picking up trash on Thames Street.
Exactly. And we haven't mentioned that Stephanie and Chris Dingess are actually married. And did you meet on Homicide, or did you meet before that? You must have met there.
Stephanie was the first person I met when I showed up for work on my first day.
Oh, get out. Oh, that's so funny. I love it.
And then you got to take out the rats.
Yeah, exactly. I hadn't been introduced to my duties yet. I had just shown up for the first day. And,
rats and Stephanie. Yeah. It's a great combination.
And Ford Wilgus, who was the Teamster captain at the time, or the transpo coordinator, I believe it was called. He was there, and he'd helped get me the job. He'd helped get me the interview, and he was a character all by himself, like quintessential Baltimore
Teamster
Hun guy. Yeah, and Teamster. But he was like really the best to me and a good mentor. But Stephanie was coming from the production office carrying a box of scripts or something, and I helped her go in, and then Ford walked up to me and he went, "Hey, that's the one you want to get with. That's the boss's niece." And I was like, "Ford, how dare you? What are you doing? This is my first day. Come on, be a gentleman." And then little did he know. Also, what I didn't know is that
you scored, man. I love it.
While I was being interviewed, Stephanie had asked Greer and Tracy to hire a boyfriend for her, and jokingly. But I do, now that I think about it, I think they were trying to pull like a Chuck Woolery on me and make a love connection.
Wow,
I don't know. I mean, like, part of the job interview shouldn't be, do you like long walks on the beach and do you listen to jazz? But I don't know.
I did actually ask that. It was, you know, I did not know who they were interviewing, but I said, if you're, you know, hire me a boyfriend.
So Ford didn't come up to you, Stephanie, and say, "Hey, Stephanie, that's a guy you got to get with."
You have to get with that guy. He doesn't know his ass from his elbow.
No, he would never talk to me like that.
Oh, so funny. That was a pretty good invitation. And Ford Wilgus and Jimmy were like the perfect, they were like the perfect match for that, in that production.
Yeah, Ford would drive Jim like to set and stuff, because he, you know, they were tight, and also like he knew how to get to everything in Baltimore. You know, he just he was, to me, Ford Wilgus was kind of Baltimore, like all wrapped up in one guy to a degree. But like I remember, like I didn't interact with the actors a lot. I do remember like my first interaction with Yaphet Kotto was in the production office. They would come in every once in a while to check their mailboxes, or if they needed, help with something, travel or whatever was going on. And there had been this song out in the 70s called I Like the Pope Smokes Dope. And it had been banned, but I somehow ended up with a t-shirt for it. And it was like a picture of Pope John Paul smoking a big fat spliff. And it said, I like the Pope smokes dope. And I'm like doing my stuff and I look up and Yaphet Kotto is kind of like staring at me. And I'm like, this guy to me, I was like, before Homicide for me, there was like Alien, Midnight Run, Across 110, like all the, like he was larger than life to me, and he's staring at me, and I'm like, what did I do? What have I done? And he goes, that's a wild shirt, man. And then he just walked off, and I was like, oh my God, am I gonna get fired because I wore this shirt? But nothing ever happened. I'm sure he forgot about it 10 seconds after he walked away. But I didn't have much to do with the cast. I would pick a lot of the guest cast up from the train station or the airport and bring them into town and get them set up at their hotel room. But like I would drive, I remember the first time I really interacted with Clark, driving him to the train station and him talking to me about, before he was an actor, having worked on crews and like construction and painting and stuff like that in scenics. And just what a warm and like normal dude Clark Johnson is. And I was really kind of dispelled because this was, I hadn't met many stars of television shows, and he really dispelled me of a lot of assumptions that you would have. But yeah, those are the two of the most memorable ones.
And Sunil, in addition to coming down to Baltimore, were there people coming through Tom's office?
Yeah. I mean, they would come up to New York, and, we had all the directors come up for their editing. We had the writers come up for their editing. So I got to sort of, and that was, again, for me, like a treat, because as people have talked about on past podcasts, the specificity of the directors, these weren't just, people who just cranked out TV. These were incredible human beings making incredible things. And so I just got to, again, be, like you said earlier, Catherine Bigelow or Adam Bernstein or all these people, Alan Taylor. Like I got to casually just be with them when they were waiting, outside the editing bay, and to meet these. And again, you had the editors on, and these editors were also really just special people, and who were, again, people who taught you whatever it is you were curious about. And so I got to sort of, again, be in this environment that everything flowed in and out of. And Tom is the kind of boss who, I think we said earlier, who I remember what I really loved about Tom, and I think Chris said this earlier, is like, once you get out here, you realize, especially in the writing world, a lot of contracts just say, stay on a show, we'll just keep giving you a title bump so that you go from this to producer to whatever. And Tom would say, you'll get producer in your title once I've taught you how to produce. And then he would teach you how to produce, and then he would let you, and that was all I knew before I got out here. And I just thought, well, that's the way you should do it. But anyway, again, I got lucky because his goal is, you need to learn how to do this. And so he let you do that. And so, yeah, being in New York was sort of the clearinghouse for the end stage of all of the stuff that happened in Baltimore. And so, yeah, I got really blessed that I got to help coordinate that, work with it, hear the conversations Tom had with these people. It was grad school.
And was the edit suite, I'm getting confused, was there an edit suite there, or was the edit suite elsewhere?
No, they were there. It was right there in the Chelsea Pier offices. And then when it moved to Tom's building, it's the bottom floor of his whole building, and the writer's office is right above that. So yeah, so editing has always been right there, which is also incredible.
So in the documentary, which centered around the subway, all that stuff in the edit suite was that in Tom's building?
Yeah, that must have been at the Piers.
That was at the Piers at that point?
When we were doing it, yeah, because that was season 6.
Right.
Were there any episodes for each of you that sort of stand out and either as most challenging, most enjoyable, or they just sort of stand out to you 30 years later? And I'll let Stephanie start if you like.
I don't really have a strong memory of a specific episode being super challenging from my perspective. I mean, I know there were challenging episodes. I do remember, and I think Kathy mentioned, that we had issues with Ned. So when I was a set PA, and there was a day where he was very challenging, and I just remember standing across the street from the bar that we were shooting in, and he came out and he was very angry and yelling at the director. And I had never seen anything like that before, and it definitely slowed the day down. I think that might have been the Crissetti episode. I feel like that was the first. So it was very early in. I think I had only done like 4 episodes of television, and I watched an actor, berating a young director was very hard to do. And I was doing it all from across the street, and then later on that evening, Tom was like, welcome to television. It was
Right.
very eye-opening. There were some challenging people involved, and, but he was an incredibly talented human being, and could be very kind at times as well. So everybody has bad days. That was just an episode that was plagued with some delays, but it also turned out to be one of the most memorable episodes of television ever. So
that's, I think, one of Chris Carr's favorite episodes is the Crissetti episode.
It is. Yeah. It's a very moving episode.
It's interesting you're talking about as a greenhorn watching that happen. And I remember, I don't remember which Ned Beatty incident it was, but I remember one we were all standing outside of Dudas because we got thrown off the set because the interaction had started inside and we're outside. And so as somebody who wasn't a greenhorn, it's like, oh, cool. Like, so do you want to go get some coffee? Like, so we have time to run and get, it was a whole different sort of like rolling your eyes and like, oh, here we go. He's just going to slow the day down. It was really, having seen it before, not from Ned, but on other productions. It was just sort of an eye-rolling situation as opposed to, the first time you see that happen, it's shocking, right? Like you said, it is shocking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah. I didn't get to go off and have coffee. I was too afraid to leave my post, Yeah,
it was like, I'd probably send somebody, go get some, whatever. Or are we going home early? Like, what's happening? It was
a little shell shock that day.
Funny.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there were days where some actors wouldn't come out of their trailers. And I do remember one time that, one of the actors wouldn't come out, and Ivan came up to me and it said, I'm going to be sending you to the hospital with a driver. And, I'm like, what am I going to do? This person, he's apparently he's not feeling well. But I'll say, I don't know if I should say who it was.
You can say it. We can bleep it out.
It was, and clearly this person had some issues, and but he eventually came out when I think they told him they were going to take him to the hospital. So he came out, and luckily I didn't have to do that. So I would say I don't remember what episode that was, but it was definitely during the 3rd season. But I do remember thinking, I really don't want to do this today.
Yeah, people don't think about the kind of responsibility PAs have. And I had a friend who was on another film, and a particular actor who was known for having substance abuse issues, and she's trying to like wake him up. I mean, trying like physically, here's this young woman, very new to the job, having to deal with this super famous person who was basically unconscious, and trying to get them up and out. And the kind of responsibility that is, when people think, oh, PA, what do you do? It's like, well, sometimes like the most important thing is that person has to get up and get on the set. How am I doing that when I'm just like a little 20-year-old, like trying to figure out this job, right? So yeah. And scary too, scary kind of responsibility. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're dealing with, hundreds of personalities a day, all trying to work on one particular goal. And, there's moments where illness or, substance abuse definitely gets in the way. And I think that happens a lot in film and television, more than you think it does. But you learn to negotiate your way through it, I guess. And some actors, when you're on screen, that's a problem, because we need to keep them. We need to have them keep going in order to keep the day going. Whereas if it's somebody else who's working in a different department, it can be dealt with in a different way. But there's a lot of, I think we give a little too much, to people who are on the screen because you need them to get through the production. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm saying that right, but
no, yeah, and also even if it's not, a substance abuse issue or whatever, they may be having, like when I worked on Scarface, it was like this big freaking competition in the morning between who was going to go on the set latest. Was it going to be De Palma or was it going to be Pacino? Right. And so whoever had to go wangle their way into that situation, you then become the person who catches the ire, right? Even though you're just the messenger, right? I have to go get that person out of the trailer. You may catch the ire from them that they want to, have on somebody else. So it's a tricky position to be in for sure. So what else? Anybody else a favorite or most challenging or interesting or episodes?
I wasn't on set a lot. I just remember the subway episode was challenging for everybody. I think it's been the documentary was about it, but I think part of the there was also extra people involved because there was a documentary, which I think maybe added to the difficulty.
Yes.
But we had to get that subway station, get the city to let us use it, so we could only use it at night. I forget, it was from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. or something like that. And so I would have to go get the film at 5 a.m. and drive it an hour south and then come back in Maryland, Baltimore, DC rush hour morning traffic with the light hitting your eyes just in that way that makes you want to shut them. And I just remember driving back and just being the traffic, it's bumper to bumper. I could sleep for 3 minutes here until someone honks the horn, but I stayed awake. But that's the only it was a different experience for me in the production office. And then my favorite episode, not my favorite, one of my favorites was the episode that Kyle directed called Shaggy Dog City Goat. And that was because Steve Allen and God, I'm going to mess her name up. Was it Jane Meadows? Audrey Meadows?
It was Jane.
Jane Meadows, his wife, they were in it. And I got to drive them around a bit. And
I bet that was great.
I was like, oh my God, I'm picking up the host of the host of the Tonight Show here. And
the original, wasn't he? Even before Jack Parr,
was
right?
He before, was
Johnny
he pre-Jack
Carson,
Parr, right? I believe so.
I think he was the first, I want to say.
Yeah. And so I got to pick him up, and he was the guy exactly what I thought he would be in a nice way. He was kind of cranky grandpa and but very nice to me. But I drove him around, and he was writing mystery novels at the time, and I had to pull over. For whatever, he wanted to know where there was an electronics store. And there happened to be one right at the end of the block. And the block was this old part of Baltimore that was full of old burlesque clubs and strippers. And it was a pretty raunchy neighborhood. So I'm driving Steve Allen through the block. And I stop, and he gets out and runs into this, he runs into the electric shop because he had to get batteries because he had one of those personal voice recorder things. And he was working a plot for one of his mystery novels while I was driving him around. And then
I love it.
And then when I was driving them both around, they would start fighting like old married couple in the car. Because she was really sweet and would just be talking to me, and he'd be in the front sitting next to me. And as she was talking, he would lean over and just keep turning the radio up. And and I was like, oh my God, I'm driving grandma and grandpa around, and they're getting ready to throw down in the car. But but she really loved
And they're
him.
so funny in that episode. That is a funny
great.
episode. The stuff with them is just classic.
They're hilarious, and the body getting shot as it goes by the wind, like all of that was really a fun kind of like, Homicide did so much different stuff, but it really was like one of the funnier episodes of the show. But as a fan, that was fun too. It was a fun couple of days at work.
Chris got to drive around all the cool people. He got to drive James Earl Jones around when he was there.
I got to drive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this is like, I've only been doing this job for like a couple of years, and suddenly like Darth Vader, the voice of Darth Vader, is getting in my car and talking to me. And like he's talking to me about growing up on a
talking to you
farm.
as Darth Vader, right?
It's kind of like more of a gentle Darth Vader. And he was also not as tall as I expected him to be, because I watched him as Darth Vader, and not only be Darth Vader, I'd watched him kill Conan the Barbarian's parents. So he was just this sweet little guy, and like he was talking to me about overcoming, like he just started talking to me like I wasn't, it was like Taxi Cab Confessions. I said like hello, and he just started talking. But talking about growing up on a farm and overcoming his stutter, and he was just so sweet. He was not at all like Darth Vader. He was way more Anakin Skywalker than Darth Vader, I guess one would say.
So, Sunil, did you have any standout episodes, either from watching interactions or just from seeing them being written and watching what they came out as on the screen?
Well, I will say I know everyone keeps going back to the subway, but it's also because of the documentary. Like it was, again, because I had just started and they were doing this completely different thing, and Ted Bogosian was like a delight to work with, and I got to coordinate a lot of that at the beginning. And so,
really?
Again, for me, I was like, oh, they're going to make a documentary about this thing that I'm really interested in. And so to get to help the coordination of that. And then it's funny because that subway, I remember I read the article upon which that story was based, and I even wrote my own shitty short play, and it's what connected me to Yash when I first met him, to be like, I wrote a play about this, and because I was just like, this is an amazing story. And then when when this show did it, I was like, oh, well, this is awesome. And so that really stood out to me as all the things that Homicide could do, including making a documentary about how an episode of TV goes from birth to, and the idea that they would show the episode in the middle and then show what happens. No one's ever done anything like that. And I just wish, and it made me sad when I heard Ted said that like it's not available, because to me, it's like, this will teach you how to make an episode of television in a most amazing way. And it's just, so that one's always stayed with me as a really special one. And ironically, Chris, the other one is when I started with Tom, and it was that 3-parter at the beginning of season 6 to be like, this show has James Earl Jones and Lynn Thigpen and Jeffrey Wright and Mekhi, and you're like, this is insane. It was just, to me, to be like, I cannot believe this is the world that I get to live in, which is, it attracts this kind of talent. And so those are the things that really stick out for me.
Yeah, I watched, when you mentioned that was one of your standout episodes, I watched part 3 of Blood Ties. And I just forget. Every time I go to watch something, forget how good it is. But yeah, Jeffrey Wright, who knew who Jeffrey Wright was 30 years ago, who was just gone on to this amazing career. He was so good in that. And obviously James Earl Jones, forget it. But then also, Chris and I were talking before we got on air here, and the actor, the 7-year-old actor, Mark John Jeffries, who played the little boy, which was the parallel story where the parents were drug dealers and they get shot because of a cop. Anyway, that kid's gone on to be in, I think, Chris, you said he's been in Power, and 30 years later, the kid has an amazing career, but also he was so good. Amazing to watch a 7-year-old put out that kind of performance. It just was, those 3 really interesting. And also the way that episode ended, that 3-parter ended, with the idea of, okay, the son is, so spoiler alert for everybody who hasn't seen it, the son, they figure out, they finally figure out is the murderer. And James Earl Jones, the father, the scion of this, amazingly powerful Black family in Baltimore. And what does he decide to do? We're leaving town and I'm protecting my son. You don't have any physical evidence. he knows his son's a murderer and he's going to whisk him away and have him not fall into the, illegal / justice system hands. But it was one of those things that Homicide did so well. It's like, let's flip the idea of white privilege over to here's black privilege in Baltimore. Here's what happens when anybody has privilege. So it just always, as in any episode, so many interesting layers to it, and also just so well executed and well written. Yeah. Okay, I'll shut up.
No, that was great. It was a real good comment on, kind of money is a great equalizer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One big question then is, which sort of rides off this, why do you think the show has retained interest and fans for 30 years later?
I mean, and I've heard other people say it, it's because we're worse off than we were when the show was on. And it's like it was dealing with all these things intelligently I know Susan and I, we talked about Shades of Grey a little bit too, and it was just dealing with the subtleties of all of these things that, it's funny, I watched American History X last night, which I haven't seen in ages. And, it's creepy to be like, oh, this is just the talking points of the party in power now. Like, y'all should watch it. It's wild. Because it is literally just listening to what we think is conversation now. The other thing that's really wild, by the way, is it takes place in Venice Beach. Did you remember that? Not weird. Anyhow, but I think it's such a snapshot of how people still think about it, and you wish they would discuss these things. Like, it's smarter than most people are. And so I think when you watch it, it does inform you. It does give you something to think about without beating you over the head with it. And I just think there's not a lot of shows that have ever done that in a way that has a human level of resonance, that doesn't lean into the schmucky drama, that doesn't lean into the story tropes, that doesn't lean into, it just presents it to you. And I think that is really, really powerful, and it was shot at ground level. It was shot alive. It makes you feel like you're there. And again, I don't feel like TV shows for the most part offer you that. I think it's why people love The Pit, is because it feels a little bit like what Homicide did, is you feel like you're there with these human beings and you're asked to be there in the moment. And I think Homicide created a version of television like that.
Yeah. And I think the idea of saying things out loud that people didn't say out loud and done in such a perfect way. And the conversations between the white detectives and the black detectives about with their different points of view of whatever's happening in that particular episode. Just, yeah.
In television today, to make a point, people feel like they have to be preachy, whereas Homicide would take an issue and address it through a conversation where just people sounded like people talking about something. It wasn't about I'm going to get, usually it wasn't about, but some sort of, huge soliloquy about an issue that was preaching to an audience. It didn't have to preach to get its point across.
Agreed. Steph?
I don't think I can say it any better than the two writers on this call. I think the writing was so powerful, and it just allowed the other creatives of this show to shine as well. It started with amazing scripts, amazing stories, and it was just elevated by the rest of the crew, taking each of those scripts on. And I think that it just resonates today because like they said, it's the same issues that we're still talking about today.
And also, it's just really good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. Very well, very good. Great show. Do you guys have time for one more question?
Yeah, I actually can I share one little bit though that I found something else I found last night when I was going through, and I'm only bringing this up because you guys have talked about this particular thing in a couple of the episodes, but the song, you've talked about how the music has been changed in the series.
I was going to ask you that. We understand you were quite an influence on some of the choices as well.
Well, the writers' assistants, we were playing CDs and, pushing it. I'd sometimes make suggestions, but one of them was, I want to say the episode was Hate Crimes. Is that the one that ends with Thanksgiving and Kellerman sitting in the squad room and the Bare Naked Ladies song is playing? So Bare Naked Ladies were my favorite band, definitely in the 90s. And I had I believe I shared that soundtrack with or not the soundtrack, but the album with Jim Yoshimura, and then it ended up in the episode. And I know that they've taken it out, which is really disappointing. But I found this. It's a letter that was addressed to Tom, that was sent to 30 Rockefeller Plaza. So it made its way to Tom, and then he sent it, and it said "Give to Stephanie" on the envelope. And it is from a guy named Bill Thompson, and it's on the Cincinnati Enquirer stationery, dated 11/24/95. So it says, to Tom Fontana, just a quick note to applaud the use of the Bare Naked Ladies, What a Good Boy on the final segment of the 11/17 broadcast. Imagine I'm sitting watching arguably my favorite TV show when it shows why, by playing arguably one of my favorite songs from one of my favorite groups. Thanks, Bill Thompson.
That's great. I love it. You got fan mail. I love it. That's
awesome.
It was pretty cool. I thought that was so fun, and I that is probably one of my favorite songs of all time. And I'm really sad that they have taken it out of the series, but it was a very powerful moment in television, I think, and I think that's why you guys have talked about it a couple of times now.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Anyway, sorry.
When Stephanie pulled that,
I have to get the DVD to experience that.
When Stephanie pulled that letter out last night, and she was like, "Guess what I have?" I was like, "Is that from in Forest Hills, New York?" But it was not.
Another one. So funny. So Chris, ask your final question.
Well, the famous question. Does anybody have any distinctive food memories of Baltimore? Because obviously it's famous for its cuisine, and
or for Sunil, whatever was the favorite food
in New York.
up at Tom's place.
Yeah.
Or drink.
I think I'm gonna. I will say a granita. That was something they introduced at the Daily Grind. A frozen coffee beverage that predated the Starbucks Frappuccino, but it basically was a Frappuccino, and it was a pure delight, pure sugary delight. And I was addicted to them. On a regular basis.
Nice.
I don't eat seafood, so crab was not a choice for me there, but I did enjoy going to eat when people would go out for crab. I would get like a steak if they had it, but I love the community of the paper on the table, the pile of crab, everybody working at their food and having beers. It did remind me of being in Buffalo when we would get, pizza and wings and sit around with the pitchers of beer. So it was always something I enjoyed doing, even though I didn't really enjoy eating the food.
Yeah, definitely a communal experience for sure.
I had a lot of good food in Baltimore, mind you, but
crab
was not something for me, unfortunately. Not a popular opinion.
Fair enough. So, Niels, do you have any food memories? Because you're in New York. Anything stand out for you when you're on the show?
Yeah, no, I mean, whenever I went down to Baltimore, it was great eating. And again, I'm from Maryland, but just, outside the DC area. But, the funny thing about New York is that, Tom is a particular kind of eater. So, I always remember lunches came from very specific places that was very specifically done, but they were all delicious. But I was trying to remember what the restaurants were we would go to, but honestly, they've all slipped out of my brain now. But there was that lovely mussels place right near Tom's building called Brussels. That was awesome.
Which is Brussels, that restaurant, was that the restaurant from The Painting Nighthawks by Edward Hopper?
Oh, I don't think so. Was it?
Really?
I don't know why. Maybe I might be lying. I might be lying.
That would be amazing. I don't think so.
Yeah.
That sounds right. I'm going to Google that way.
Yeah. So like Sunil, I grew up in Maryland and I loved crabs, and I loved the crabs in Maryland. In Baltimore, I mean. A Bricky's was a great place to go. But I liked my crabs off of the back of a truck along the highway.
Sure.
And we're always better eating at a picnic table outside, but the crabs were great. But just being in my early 20s and being, living on PA wages, we would eat at great places in the production office. But I remember, a lot of food at Jimmy's, a lot of staggering into this place called the Sip and Bite, which was near some bars in Canton. In and out of there. I remember one time I ordered a hamburger, fries, and a milkshake at like 2:30 in the morning, and this guy just heard me order and leaned over my table and he's like, "Who do you think you are, Buddy Holly?" And I guess because it was like out of the 50s. I don't know.
What does
But
that mean?
like I think there was there a place
That's
called
exactly
Nacho
what to
Mama's?
order at the Sipping Point. That's what you order there, right?
Yeah. What else? I was like, oh my god! I just had 2 cases of beer. What do you want from me, dude?
I need some protein.
Yeah, I think there's a place called Nacho Mama's that was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
And then if you had a special occasion, you would go to this place that is still there called Peter's Pub, which was a really cozy, beautiful place to go get a steak and a cocktail.
Still was. It still is. And it was the first place that Chris and I went to when we came back to Baltimore last year.
Oh, nice.
And
Hey, cool.
it was pretty amusing because we sat at the bar, and as we're sitting there just starting to order, Chris leans over and he goes, "John Waters is behind you." and I was like, wow, welcome to Baltimore again. You've got the King of Baltimore in the room,
That's
you know?
right.
And then I was like, should we say something? I mean, we worked on the show with him, and, I've been talking to like Greer and Kathy like on a regular basis, but he's like, no, we can't be those people. Those people next to us are those people.
It's
well,
not
he
a
was on the
place in
show
the
twice.
universe.
You had
I know.
Yeah, you had a good excuse, right?
I know. I could have been like, we could have just said, we're here for the reunion, and it would, because he was invited to the reunion.
He was a sweetie. You probably would have been fine.
Yeah, he's a super nice guy, but I didn't want to bother him.
Super nice guy. Yeah. Understood.
I like to stay out of the way.
You do? We understand that now, Chris. Okay.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everybody. It's been awesome and lovely to see Chris and Stephanie again, because last time I saw you was last year, and nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too,
thank
Chris
you.
and Susan.
Thank you for
for your
having
time
us.
today.
There's so much I did not see being on the set, and so many things I didn't understand and didn't know. So thank you for sharing all that, because a lot of it is all news to me, really.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's my memory is crap, so I hope I told the truth.
I know.
Especially the rat in the trash bag.
Man, Baltimore, what are you going to do?
Okay, so that was Stephanie, Chris, and Sunil, and that was I thought that was a very fun episode, and I particularly enjoyed Chris's story about the mousetrap and how you have to put the mousetrap in a bag first. Makes a lot of sense. And I also quite enjoyed how Chris was talking about his sort of philosophy he had, how we're all, space dust, so to speak, and we're all sort of sharing this. He had this sort of Buddhist sort of philosophy where, who am I to impose my will on other people? Like, we're stopping people from crossing over and things
Just
like
because I have
that.
a walkie-talkie, right?
Yeah, I was finding Chris's description really quite amusing about how he was sort of going for different roles. And weirdly, I could relate to him when he talked about enjoying doing tasks, when he enjoyed going off doing errands. I quite enjoy going off and doing errands as well. I think it's because I quite enjoy meeting strangers and stuff. So, so I could feel a bit of affinity with Krista on some of those things.
Right. And I love the opposite where Chris said, Chris said he didn't feel like, who am I to tell somebody not to cross the street? And Stephanie was like, give me that walkie-talkie. Once you got the walkie-talkie, you have the power. And then she was like, yeah, send me back out on the set. Give me a walkie-talkie. I love the open. It's always sweet to remember things you sort of don't think about very much. And talking about Yaphet's wedding, that was really sweet.
Yes.
For the show. And I have some great pictures from there.
I like hearing about his wedding and how it was a Jewish wedding, and it just sounds like a lot of fun, but it's sort of blowing off.
Right, and then apparently, and I didn't remember this, but Nation of Islam security guys, I think, were also there. So good mix of people.
I've had an experience with Nation of Islam security. Back in 2004, I was doing some filming for covering the mayoral election, and they had, for some reason, at this particular event, because it was Operation Black Vote, so trying to get the black community to be more engaged with voting. And this event I was filming, Nation of Islam were the bodyguards for the event, because there was some fear that National Action, which is a far-right group, were going to come and attack this event. And so I was assigned my own Nation of Islam bodyguard.
Nice.
So it was quite funny. So I've never had that before in my life. That was really interesting. Yeah.
Great. I also love their origin stories. Like I say every time, every
Mm.
episode, I love people's origin stories. And Stephanie being in school, and and she says she was a nepo baby, but she knew when she got there that that was not going to carry any weight or any water with anybody. So she really had to do her job and do a good job and dig in. And that Sunil met Tom in a bar. I love that, and that he already, like you said, Chris was a Homicide fan, not knowing as he's chatting with Tom that Tom was a TV producer. And I love that comment where he said, most TV producers in the first 30 seconds you're talking with them will give you their whole resume. He said Tom didn't do that, which
No.
surprised him. And then I didn't know that Chris,
Mm.
Chris is a hometown boy and went to Towson University. A lot of the other, many film industry people came out of Towson as well as UMBC. And I did not know that about Chris.
Yeah, there's a bit I had to edit out because Chris had some audio problems at the very early bit. He did mention how he'd made a mistake and thought he should have gone to UNBC because it had a film program, and I had to sadly edit that out because the audio was really bad at that point. Because bless Chris and Stephanie, they both bought brand new microphones for this interview.
Yay.
And we had to stop the interview after less than 20 minutes because something was going very wrong with the microphones that they had picked. And so we had to ask them just to use their regular microphone, and suddenly everything was okay. So we apologize about some of the very early
I think it worked out good though.
audio issues.
Yeah, you did a good job with the edit.
Yeah, and thank you again, Chris and Stephanie, for going to the effort to get a microphone. I hope they managed to get a refund on them. Anyway.
And I think many people have that experience that Chris had, where you end up on a movie set, whether on purpose or accidentally.
Yeah.
Where he said he was working on Washington Square, and he goes, which is a period piece, and he goes down. They were shooting that in an area of Baltimore, I believe, called Union Square, where they put dirt, on the streets to mimic what it looked like in 18 whatever. And he said there's the movie magic. He walked onto the set, and all of a sudden he's back in the 1800s, by virtue of the set decoration, the set dressing.
Yeah.
And
It's a very cool experience if you get to experience that. We go to a place they've really put a lot of effort into it, because I was very lucky to do a week on Downton Abbey, and walking through some of the sets was just like a time warp. It was just amazing, the detail, and then when the lights are on and stuff, it just gets very magical. It's very cool.
Yeah, I had that experience, and I mentioned it in that prior episode years ago when I was working with Joe Byrock on the TV remake of Casablanca, and they
yes,
went
yes.
back to the original blueprints and built the sets from the original blueprints. And if you walked on the set, it just sort of blew you away. So yeah, I think everybody has that's in the business, and even people that aren't, that happen upon a set, or a location. It's a very compelling experience usually.
Yeah, and one other thing that came out, which was semi-unique, I think, to Tom Fontana, his apprenticeship model, and how he would take people on as an assistant for 2 years. And then when he felt they were ready, he would then train them in the art of producing a TV show. And the majority of people who've been through that process, like Sunil, Stephanie and Chris, have all gone on to do amazing things after Homicide. And they all root it back to this experience on the show.
Yeah, and I think on other shows and in other places where you see all these iterations of producer, executive producer, assistant producer, assistant producer, you don't really know what it means. And he said, in some arenas, it means you're on the show long enough to get a different label. But for Tom, it was like, you will get that title when I teach you how to be a producer. You don't just get it for hanging around long enough. Or who knows? Sometimes producers are also, part of the funding of the project. But yeah, I love that. It was like, you don't get that name until you know how to do it, which I really liked.
Yeah, and that apprenticeship model is not that common either.
No.
And this is the thing I think a lot of people don't understand about the film and TV industry. It should work like that. It should be an apprenticeship model, but it's very rare now. I mean, obviously, since the studio system sort of died, at least with film, that kind of model disappeared, and it's now up to the producer if they feel like giving back or not to actually sort of train people in that way. And Tom does, from what I hear, give back to a lot of creators, and that's something to be commended.
Yeah, and how much they appreciate that, from David Simon to these guys. I mean, just knowing when you're in it, the privilege of having found somebody that has this incubation sort of mission for people, which is just really, really terrific. I also love when Stephanie talked about going into the writer's office. She was already obviously familiar with the show and just being completely intimidated by all these incredibly talented writers, and that she said working with writers became her joy, and that she carried that into what she does now, producing and coaching writers, in the work she does now. So I thought that was cool. She took that model and took it with her.
Mm, 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 mm. And you just remind me of something else. Chris was telling us a story about how he used to be sent into the set days before filming to go and look for either homeless people or rodents, and
pigeons.
or pigeons. And he was obviously quite nervous doing that, but he would turn on the lights and then suddenly he would see the set and be in some sort of awe, just seeing the detail of the set. And then he would look around the set and learn different things, like why the glass was placed at such an angle to remove reflections, etc. And he said it became his film school, which was very cool.
Yeah, and kudos. He made a nod to Vince Peranio, the set designer, and the set dressers and set decorators, because that, I think he used the term lived in, that it felt so real to be on that set, and all the little tchotchkes and knickknacks on everyone's desk that were sort of nods to their personalities. But yeah, that was a terrific set, and nods to Vince Peranio. I love that when Chris started trying to decide what department he wanted to be in.
Oh, yes.
He's like, I don't think, I could drive a truck. And I could be a grip. And Jim Finnerty said, no, you're not a grip. And camera. And he said, there's too much math to do with camera. And I thought, not really. But then when he said the whole measuring thing, but yeah, you definitely had to run numbers in your head when you're running a tape measure across the room, to keep everything in focus.
Definitely.
So fun.
And I better remember where people are moving during a scene. So you did quite a good short-term memory as well, because when you rehearse the scene and stuff and choreographing the camera and where it's going to be at this precise moment, there's an art to that as well. So camera's very complicated.
Yeah, and I thought it was another thing I didn't know, many things I didn't know that were happening off the set, was the idea. Now, I know I write now, I'm a freelance writer, and depending on what organization you write for, you often get a style book. Now, if you write for a newspaper, you use the AP style book to go by the way they spell things, the way they abbreviate things, whether they use the Oxford comma or not, that kind of thing. And that Tom had a very specific style book for the way the scripts were formatted and written. And then the idea of the Bible of the show, which is, they mentioned, I think Jim Yashimura sticking his head out of the office and saying, what was so-and-so's mother's name? And you have to remember what they were if they're referenced again in a later show. It's like if you're writing a novel, like a lot of times people talk about revising novels or stories, and you realize that the main character had brown eyes in the opening chapter, and somewhere in the middle of the novel, you changed it to blue eyes. So the idea of having a Bible, because you have to remember through 122 episodes, all those side stories and backstories and returning characters that may not be there. They may come back years later. And you have to know all, as my friend Carrie says, all the things about them. And those two things never occurred to me, the style book and the Bible.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like Peter Garrity's character, who was like a minor character in one episode, and was it season 4, and then comes back in season 6, and they build a whole episode around that
as a main
so
character. Yeah.
Actually, end of season 5, wasn't it? Yeah. Brilliant. So yeah, that kind of stuff's very important. And as you're saying, I think quite a few novelists could benefit from that. I know John le Carre made a few continuity errors across his novels with the age of George Smiley and various other
Oh,
characters.
interesting.
So yeah, it's quite funny.
Yeah. And then, we go back to this often. The idea was like so much of it was pre-digital technology. And the
Mm.
idea of printing and printing and printing and printing scripts and script changes and faxing notes and all that stuff, all of that on paper. And that Stephanie said they jokingly called the show Homicide: Life Killing Trees because so much paper was used, and there would be less so used now because you can email and text, call sheets and scripts and all
Yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff.
No, I think we've covered it, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think just like what Stephanie was saying about sort of the reality of being in the 90s TV show. I mean, I remember one of my earliest tasks on a short film I worked on where you had to create movement orders and you'd have to physically photocopy a map and kind of and then sort of then re-photocopy it into the document you've created to then be able to create multiple copies of the thing. And it was just like crazy old school things like that, which now you could just cut and paste things so easily into documents, which you just couldn't back then. And even mobile phones. There's a photo Stephanie shared with us with her and the kind of production
Brick.
phone. Yeah, the brick, and it's huge. And obviously now everybody, I mean, I guess towards the end of the show, everybody pretty much was starting to have a mobile phone, but
No.
it was a rare thing. I mean, we all have one now, but back in the day.
No, because it went from what people had on their belts were beepers. All the freelance workers had beepers, in case they got a call to the next show or whatever production, or they got a call for work. I don't know that hardly any of us had cell phones. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was working on the newspaper, and that was that was after the show.
Christmas 1998 was when I got my first cell phone.
Yeah, so
I
somewhere
remember
around
that.
there. So somewhere right when the
Mm.
show was sort of ending, I guess we started getting them.
Yeah, that was they
Yeah.
were because they weren't affordable before because they were quite a lot of money, and then suddenly the price sort of dropped on them.
And they got
A
little.
bit like electric cars.
They got
Yeah,
little.
and then they got
And they had
small.
those little
Yeah,
antennas
yeah.
on them. Remember they all had little antennas on them.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then the cool ones in the Matrix and stuff, and then yeah.
I did like some of the comments at the end when we talked about why the show's still relevant. And Sunil talked about the human level of resonance without the schmucky drama, without the story tropes, presenting it to you at ground level. It was shot at ground level, and it made you feel like you were there. It was shot alive. I think he used that terminology. And Chris talking about the idea that there were issues presented without being preachy. The issues were presented within the
Yes.
dialogue and
Yeah.
within the stories, not where somebody stops and does a monologue at you about what should or shouldn't be, in the world. And that one of the things that Stephanie said was that she thinks it was so powerful because all the crafts were allowed to share their amazing talents on the show, from the creators and the writers, but also down to, and we talked about this with even the grips and electricians, about how they had to invent stuff as we went along, which
Yeah.
made the show interesting and creative. Um, and I think, yeah, it had an energy, I think, because of that. And I really liked that comment she made. We do ask people at the end, like, what they're working on now or what they worked on since Homicide, and sometimes IMDb doesn't have everything or doesn't have everything up to date. So we just want to mention. So Sunil went on to be a staff writer on The Beat and on Oz, moved up to executive story editor, and then moved to LA and worked on CSI Miami. And
Co-producer on CSI Miami
yeah,
is a big thing.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
since
yeah.
CSI, showrunner for many series, including Body of Proof, The Red Line, Revenge, All Rise,
My wife liked Revenge.
and 4400. And he has something
Yeah,
at
yeah.
development at Hulu that we hope, fingers crossed, it happens. And after Homicide, Chris moved to New York. Chris and Stephanie, we do mention in the show, are married. They live in LA now, but he moved to New York and started out as a writer's assistant there with Glenn Gordon Caron on Now and Again, and started writing sample scripts. And then he moved to LA and worked as a writer and co-producer on Medium, which is one of my favorite shows. Every time I try to catch that in reruns, I love that show. I thought the writing and the acting on that show was so good.
Who was in Medium? I feel like I could see the poster, but
It's Patricia Arquette, yeah. Then he came back to New York to work with Tom Fontana and Julie Martin, one of the writers and producers on Homicide, on the Bedford Diaries. And then he was also a writer-producer on Men in Trees, Reaper, Eastwick, Chaos, and on Marvel's Agent Carter. He was a writer, executive producer. So just like on and on, they have like an amazing credits. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Emergence, Gen V. I mean, it just goes on and on. And I did not know this. Chris also created and wrote the Skybound comic book Manifest Destiny. Hello. I love it.
And didn't that lead to a board game as well?
It led to a board game based on the comic series.
I mean, who from rat catcher to board game creator, you know, that's quite a career.
Love it. And then and Stephanie moved on, kept working as a writer and a showrunner assistant, worked with Julie Martin and Jorge Zamacona on Oz, The Beat, other Levinson Fontana projects, and then went to LA. Worked with Jorge on a series called Wanted, and she worked as a script coordinator as well as writer showrunner on other shows. Was an assistant on Desperate Housewives, and worked with Tom Spezialy.
Yeah.
And then moved up to as a production associate, and then to director of development and production, to VP of production. And on a few series was credited supervising producer on Another Life, season 2 co-producer, Another Life season 1, production executive, Aftermath, Hellfire executive on Alias Grace, associate producer on Working the Angles.
Yeah.
So
cool. No, all of them gone on to do really great things there.
Yeah, really went on. And Stephanie also wanted us to mention she was an extra. I don't know when she had a speaking part. She appeared in the show twice.
So no, fantastic. So no, thank you again to Stephanie, Chris, and Sunil. That was really great, and I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as we did. It was a really fun conversation, and what a I hope there's younger listeners out there who think about a film career. I hope you get inspiration from listening to their journeys.
Yeah, and there's a commercial on now. I think it's a Progressive commercial where it shows a couple of production assistants on a film set, and they go to the trailer to give the the mascot for the insurance company is bubbly water, and the mascot looks at it and says the bubbles are too big and slams the door of the trailer, and one of the PAs says, "I went to film school for this," and walks away. And I thought, yes, you did. But you know what? You're on a film set. You're starting at the bottom. That's how we all started. So no poo-pooing working on a film set at the bottom. If you're on a film set and you start at the bottom, just thank your lucky stars you're on that film set, and just keep learning and keep listening and keep your mouth shut and keep your eye on whoever your boss is, and just keep going. And you will be able to move up like these guys did. Just amazing careers from that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and thank you, Susan, and we will catch you on the next episode.
See you next time.